All right. Where am I? Naphtali. Okay. So the layout is described. Oh, and they had, so this is some commentary. The layout of the camp is also described here. It has to be in a square shape with the Mishkan in the center. 3 tribes are set up their tents and banners on each side while the Levites form in the inner square. The order in which the tribes camp will also be in the order in which they travel. So you can see this like huge phalanx of people traveling. So that means, well, if that's what it means, where are the women and children? If they're marching, are the women and children schlepping after them? Are they camped there with their families? It's not clear. You know, if this is how they're traveling, is this how the army is going? And then all their women and children and elderly are behind them, which might be a strategic military plan, because then you would be protected, I guess, unless you're attacked from behind. But it's not clear about them. Okay, so I want to go to this idea. I talked about silence and Rabbi Sachs and everything. And okay. So here, Parshat Bamidbar opens with God speaking to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, instructing him to take a census of the whole Israelite community. Blah, blah, we know this. The whole community, and then he says the whole community, and then excludes women from this designation. Israelite women are excluded from the idea of who and what compromises Jewish community. The women become invisible. And the great scholars, I said this, and commentators of Jewish tradition found inherent value in those who were counted by God. Rashi believed that God took a census of those who were dear to him, and Rabbi Isaac Arama argues each person counted had individual worth. The Midrash compares those who were counted to God's precious pearls, suggesting that God cared deeply for them because they were the children who God had given birth. This assigning of value to those who were counted begs the question, were the Israelite women not dear to God? Did they not also have individual worth? Were they not the precious children of the divine? What does the exclusion say about the perceived value of Jewish women and their contributions to Jewish communal life? Now, this is obviously a contemporary view. And I know Susan thinks this, and I guess we can say, okay, this was a military census. So that is the reason. But I also think what's interesting is that when you read this, what's your emotion or what's your reaction to all these lists? What's your reaction?
The lists of the numbers of men, or where are the women?
When you read all these lists, what's your reaction?
I guess where you just said, you know, where are the women? The women become invisible. It's like, I can't picture these men who are supposed to be out fighting or protecting them. I can't picture them changing diapers and feeding babies and preparing meals and all the things that a woman is expected to do then for their tent.
They have diapers. They didn't have Pampers, that's for sure.
It's like, you know, in Beijing, China, they didn't have diapers. I don't know whether they do now or not, but that's another issue.
What about
baby formula?
Any positive reaction to this?
Yes.
Okay, Penina, and then Risa.
I think that they counted them strategically. It depends who they were fighting. It depends what kind of fight. I think the counting to start with started because they wanted to be prepared to know how many people will be defending them or fighting for them. You have to remember that they carry different kind of arms that people carry today and use today. You see a woman carrying those heavy, whatever they call it, the shields or whatever it is that they had. I think it's wasn't conceivable to them that they'll be able to be strong enough to do that. I don't think it's because of the gender as per se gender. I think it's what you're physically able to do. Okay. And at the time, this is what they expected to happen, that the men should be, and they counted the able men. That's it. They're able to protect, to fight. So by the way, when I'm already on that subject, I wanted to tell you, you were right about the name David.
Oh,
Yes, no, it's really important. It's really interesting. It derived from the word Dod because the vowels were discovered a lot later. And Dod, at the time, you were allowed to marry your niece. The uncles and the niece could marry, and they did. So the word Dod, uncle, also became a description of a lover. Anile dodi vedodili, you know the song?
I'm in my uncle's and my uncle is mine.
Yeah, so it's actually not my uncle.
Oy
It's
vey. I love it.
in
Kidding
the,
you.
in the
I
book
know.
of, in the
Okay,
book of Song of Songs, it shows as a beloved.
okay. I want to go. I don't want to. I don't want to dwell
That's
on
not the
this.
end of it. Okay.
You
Then
can-
also derived from the word yedid, like you said.
Panina,
Look at
this
the
is for
Panina.
women.
It's
No,
enough.
no, I'm coming to the defenders. Wait.
Okay.
So the word of Yedid, it's also a very close friend. So like I said, the vowels came later. But in Akkadian, the word David means a big general, a big fighter.
Okay, that's interesting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
We can go.
Rabbi,
Teresa, and then Lori.
I think the individual names are teaching us something. It's not that we have to learn the names. I think that we have to look at another person and try to get to know that person,
Exactly.
either by name or by culture, that each one of us is very important in what we have to give to the world.
Exactly.
And therefore, we have to be aware of the individuality of each of us, that we will never be repeated. So we're not cogs in a machine. We're not going to be repeated ever. Our children and our children's children, each of us will remain individual all through the time. So we have. That's how I see it.
You. And also, this is kind of the opposite of a psychology about army, where you're supposed to lose your ego and your individuality and become one of the group. Yet that's kind of the mentality, and that this is the exact opposite. We're doing each one by name. And that's a different mentality of an army, this kind of army and also, as you said, every individual counts and is unique. Lori.
I was just going to say that I think if we change the narrative a little bit, and instead of calling it a census, call it a draft. Because basically what this is getting a draft together so that you know who's going to be available to fight for you. And it, rather than exclusionary, I think if we look at it this way, it becomes what it's just a specific list, not designed to leave out the women, but only for expediency. You need to know who you've got available to fight.
I agree with you. That's a good point. I like calling it a draft. I had also another response to this list. I was impressed. I went, wow,
Yeah.
There are a lot of fighters. There are a lot of princes. There are a lot of leaders. They know their names. They're important. I found it very impressive and intimidating. We know that the Canaanites, heard about them and were afraid. I mean, we know that from the Rahab story that they already had a reputation. And this is not even the fighting men who end up going into the land, because we know that they mess up and end up staying for 40 years. At this point, they were expecting to go in pretty soon. It was only after a lot of rebellions and things. And then the last straw was the spies coming back and saying, oh my God, we're like grasshoppers and they're like giants and we can't do it. But even here, 2 years after being in the desert, they're already pretty strong and pretty, organized. Yes, Merle.
Is it important to know what their names mean and why they were given the names they were given?
I
Because
think
names had to have been repeated somewhere along all those people.
I think names are important, and when we hear of the birth of someone and their given name, and then we say we named him this because,
right?
Sometimes they tell. I'm sure all the 12 sons, original sons of Jacob, all their names meant something. And we learned what they meant and why they were named this. Reuben, here, behold the son. That was the first one. Yosef meant extra, addition, so yes. But I don't know that these names, maybe if you're studying really deeply, you could go into every name and kind of discern their quality as a fighter or something about them. That would be interesting. If you're a Torah scholar and we're doing it every day, we're going to look into this. But so I'm sure it has significance. That is why I want to talk about the next census near the end of this book.
May I just interject something from what has been said before? One of them, I found this very long, but I think we have to caution. First of all, question: whose midrash was that you put on the wall? That wasn't Jonathan Sachs, was it?
No, that was a different one. Jonathan Sachs was the one about silence and hearing God's voice in the wilderness.
But that wasn't it. It was other things that.
No. This was another one that I wanted because I'm segueing to something about women, and I'll just tell you who it is. It's the daughters of Zelophehad. The daughters of Zelophehad, and that's why I'm saying we should notice their women are not mentioned, but now, and I love to think. First of all, I wanted to show you how huge this organization was and how many nobles and princes there were, so that when these daughters come to talk to them, it's a huge deal. It's really scary. They're not even counted, whatever. They're certainly, and now I want to show you, that's the only reason I was bringing that up, Susan, to show you this. And I wanted to share this because this is something that struck me. I didn't read it anywhere. But later on, and
read that section. I want to go back to that.
You're muted, Susan. You're muted.
Okay, before we leave that section, I wanted to go back to what you had before for midrash, that midrash that was not did not have an author, and I would caution against imposing 21st century and 20th century.
It was from a woman.
Viewpoints upon
Reform website. It was from a woman rabbi in the Reform website of different commentaries.
Okay, so I would caution against simply imposing 21st century.
You keep muting yourself.
Computer, it doesn't allow me to talk too much. It was set up by my husband, so. But in any event, a caution against the 21st century viewpoint that always looks, upon with disfavor upon eliminating women. And I think that Laura was totally right that this is for an army, and there's some things that I as a woman appreciate not being included in, and one of this would be the draft,
Right.
And to be respected for those those strengths that women have. So
okay.
All
right, I want to look at this. I hear what you're saying. This is Numbers 26. That was Numbers 1. Okay, somebody read this, please. I'm going to highlight it. This is another one. This is 25 chapters later. Who would like to read?
I'll read it. After the plague, the Lord said to Moses and to Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, take a census of all the congregation of the people of Israel from 20 years old upward by their fathers' houses, all in Israel who are able to go to war. And Moses and Eleazar, the priest, spoke with them in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, saying, take a census of the people from 20 years old and upward, as the Lord commanded Moses. The people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt were.
Okay, so here's the same exact thing. Take a census of the people, and 20 years old and upward who can go to war. So it's kind of the same census. And they list all their names again. Some of them died since then. The sons of Simeon, the sons. And what's the purpose this time? This time the purpose is And then there's less. There's 601,000 that they counted. And then what's the point of this census?
For an inheritance.
For inheritance.
Apportionment of the land.
These are divided according to the number of names. You give them, so this is like they're planning to go into the land, and this is the land you're going to inhabit, and we're doing it by the same standard as the fighters. So now it's not about the war. It's not
Right.
about an army. It's not about, and Susan, as you said, as a woman, I appreciate it when it was for the draft, but I don't know. And what happens? This amazing story. Here are all the list. And here comes some women, and their names are mentioned a couple of times. So they are important. Finally, we're hearing from some women, but it's not I was talking yesterday or on Wednesday about David and Bathsheba. They call her the woman, and they call her the wife of the Hittites, Uriah. They never call her by her name, except when the first time when David said, "Who's that?" They say that's Bathsheba. But other than that, when he brings her in, all the story about her, she's never referred to by her name. It's just the woman or the wife of. So we know, the reason I said, look at all those names, suddenly we have these sisters and their names are mentioned. And I personally, when I look at that previous list in the beginning, that's intimidating.
Mhm.
They're all there. All those 600,000 men and the leaders and the princes and Moses and the priests, and they go face them. So this is an important story. Even the Torah thinks it's important because it's not five daughters of Zelophehad, which they could have been referred to. They give their names. So who would like to read this? Okay, Merle.
Then drew near the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, from the clans of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, the names of it.
Let's stop. These girls have a noble heritage. They're from Joseph. The best of all of them is Joseph. We know that. He was also the mystic, and he was visionary, and he forgave his brothers. So these daughters come from the line of Joseph. So that's, I think that they even mention their heritage already gives them status in the story. Okay, continue.
The names of his daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Haglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest and before the chiefs and all the congregation at the entrance of the tent of meeting, saying,
Okay,
Father,
wait. To me, this is like going into the United States Senate or the Capitol building, walking into the Capitol building where the senators and the representatives are all in session and saying, excuse me, we'd like to say something. These daughters, so sisters, and I mean, I wrote a Shabbat message about this like last year. I actually saw them like holding hands because they were so scared to go forward, or like, oh my God, this is really scary, but we've got to do it, giving each other courage. They didn't go alone. They went as a group because I think they would have been too frightened to go alone. Okay, Penina, let's just finish the thing and then I'll call on you. Okay, continue.
Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among the company of those who gathered themselves together against the Lord in the company of Korah, but died for his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be taken away from his clan because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brothers.
In other words, like our uncles are getting, we should get, give us a possession, give us some land. That took guts. That took guts for these girls to do this. I consider them very heroic. And I don't see them as particularly, they're not married. because later on there's a big discussion about who they're going to marry. So they're unmarried. So how old could they be in that time? They could have been teenagers.
Teenagers.
I was going to say, it doesn't mention their age.
No, but we know they were not married yet.
Right.
And marriage was very young. So they could have all been like 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, or 12. Who knows? They were young, I imagine. This is my own thing. Okay, so now let's just finish it and then we can talk about it. Who would like to read the second paragraph? Mara, why don't you read?
Moses brought their case before their Lord.
Okay, I want to
And the-
stop you. Moses didn't even know what to say. He was nonplussed. He was like, well, this has never happened. I don't know. I got to talk to God. Because I think that's so interesting that, he has wisdom and he's been doing this for a long time, but the first time women spoke up and said, what about us? He didn't know what to say. I admire him that he didn't say no, but he didn't know what to say. Continue, Mara.
And the Lord said to Moses, the daughters of Zelophehad are right. You shall give them possession of an inheritance among their father's brothers and transfer the inheritance of their father to them. And you shall speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a man dies and has no son, then you shall transfer his inheritance to his daughter. And if he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. And if he has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brothers. And if his father has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to the nearest kinsman of his clan, and he shall possess it. And it shall be for the people of Israel a statute and rule, as the Lord commanded Moses.
Wow. Okay, I have to stop share. No. Okay, so what a change from the first census or draft to the second one in terms of these women, I don't know, thought about it, experienced it, found their voice, saw the, the weaknesses of men in the Korach revolt, realized, that men that they are as good as, or they deserve something. And though it's not, if there were a brother, he would come first. Even so, it's way more advanced. And apparently, I think in the first century CE, they switched it that daughters and sons inherit equally. It was pretty, in rabbinic Judaism, they moved it to daughters and sons inherit equally, which is probably way before most of the world, especially in the ancient, Near East. Okay, Pnina, what did you want to say?
Okay, I was looking at the sentence that they were mentioning the tribes, but when they were counting the men, they didn't distinguish between the men that came from Egypt that weren't a member of the family, and yet they were counted in. So that means that they were already one unit, and they were considered to be with the tribes. So
Right.
there was acceptance there and inclusion of all these people that didn't come from the 12 sons or
Right.
from the 12 tribes. So that's a very significant point. And later on, when they're dividing it again, they are including everybody. And when they're talking their brothers, I'm thinking of all these people that weren't their brothers in the beginning when they were in Egypt. And now all of a sudden we have all these people that are considered to be one family. I think it's amazing. This is something that you should actually, you have to look at what's not said. What happened to these people? So now they're being actually counted as a member of the people of Israel.
Right.
You weren't left behind. There we go.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments on that, or strike you anything about the sisters and the change? And what do you think? I mean, do you have any sense of why? Oh, okay. By the way, does anybody know the very last chapter of Bamidbar? There's a caveat to this. Does anybody know what it was? Does anybody know what happened? So the men, I love it, came back to Moses and said, this is in the text, well, they are part of the tribe of Manasseh, okay? And they own land in Manasseh. But what if they marry a man from another tribe? Then she brings her land with her to him. And then somebody, let's say she marries a Benjaminite or a not a Levite, probably wouldn't, but a Judite. Then the people of the Judah man would get her property. She'd bring it with her. So they were all worried about the property. And so then Moses amended, I can't remember, I can look if God said it or Moses said it, that they could only marry men in their own tribe. So now they were limited to marrying men in their own tribe so it means again, they weren't married yet. So, because they come to this before they were married. Lori, did you want to say something?
Well, it sounds to me like maybe some of those men would be their first cousins.
No, it's okay then.
You can marry your first cousin. Well, yeah, but the women said, okay. It's like, I wonder, does that mean that when she married, I guess it didn't matter. You married a Manassite and you were a Manassite. So your land was still in the tribe, but I wondered if it became her husband's land. I don't know. I don't know legally what it was. In many places, certainly in Europe, for another 2,000 or 1,500 years, 2,500 years, when a woman married, that the man got everything, all of her land, all of her property. That's one of the reasons Queen Elizabeth I didn't want to marry, because he would have then ruled over her. So that's very interesting about this census and being counted.
I have another thought on that. I've always loved that story, but this is also a paradigm of compromise.
Yes.
And I just read a review of an author whose father was a negotiator, and he said, always try and get a win-win, even if you think outside the box. And I'm not sure this is thinking outside the box, but I think this is a good model of compromise, of having both sides. The women win, and then the men have a point of keeping it within their tribe. And there may have been some good-looking guys in the tribe of Manasseh.
There were. I'm sure there were.
So, so what's the deal? It's also, I think, in later years of trying to marry within the Jewish faith.
In the tribe.
In the tribe, for goodness sake.
Well, yeah, you're right. And perhaps there were different rituals. We don't know from tribe to tribe and whatever, but certainly your identity was of your tribal identity and your land and whatever. I also think, though, as we conclude, that the women found a way to be counted. And that's why I wanted to say I'm not saying Judaism doesn't count women, but in that one, they didn't count. And in this one, it wasn't about war, and they still weren't being counted. And this time, these girls came and said, we count.
They found a way to make themselves important.
But not only for them, but for all daughters.
That's what I meant.
All daughters now. In the future, they count. Okay.
Do their names ever come up again? Do we hear individually of each of these women ever again?
Only in the story again.
Just the story itself.
And then the one where they complain.
Okay. All right. Which is a continuation. Yeah. But you know what intrigues me always? The names that are used in Israel today, many of them are based on the text, but their names some of them are, but not all 5 of them are common names in Israel at all. And I never understood why. I would have thought that would have been a draw for a name for women, and it isn't.
Well, Noah is a big name in Israel.
Noah is, but
Noah is, but
Tirza.
Tirza is.
Tirza's a big name too.
Tirza is, and what about the others?
Hogla, Mala, Machla, maybe. I don't know.
When I was reading that part, Tirza was the name that came up. Noah and Tirza were names that I came up that I know of right here.
Exactly. Exactly. Noah and Tirzah, I absolutely know. But the others,
I have.
I
know
don't
Rachel.
understand why they're not used.
They
Okay.
are. Rachel, Leah, Rivka, very common.
But
Those
no,
are not the names of the daughters of.
Not those names.
Only those daughters.
I'm
Okay.
looking at those special women.
okay, well, Cindy,
If looking at Numbers 2, the tribe of Manasseh had 32,000 plus. So there were, and those were just men. So they had a lot to choose from.
32,000 between 20 and older. Yes, they did.
That's good.
That's
They had a
true.
large population of men to choose from, for goodness sake. So,
I'm sure they would be very desirable wives. I think the Midrash talks about that they were very wise, they were very charitable, they were very kind, but also how many women own property?
Yeah, they're the only ones.
In ancient Israel, they were, well, now other daughters, because of them, you have to realize this became a law and a statute that if there's no brother, sisters can inherit, which was a huge step up. And so they, made the first step for all daughters in terms of counting. So
This
If-
is very
if there's-
interesting.
If there's a bunch of sisters, how do they divide up the land?
they divided into five, be five. If they got a big tract of land, or they shared it, or they lived on it together. And then when
Yeah,
they
I suppose
married,
so.
they would take a little of it with them to their, I'm sure they worked it out, you know what I mean? But the fact that they even had some was new and not in Moses's plan. This was not in his consciousness. He wasn't even thinking that. He didn't even think about it. And, he had no daughters. He only had 2 sons.
I have
So
a question. What
and-
if you're the firstborn daughter and you have brothers and grandpa left it to the granddaughter?
no, they wouldn't. Not until
That wasn't allowed, I don't
1,000
think.
years later. But then they
Oh.
all inherited equally, but the brother always took precedent. But
Oh.
even so, and say the brother died in war, then the sisters would get it. I mean, this was open to huge
Change.
opportunities for women. And I just thought it was interesting to compare the beginning and the end and look at the two. So,
There's
Thank
something
you.
to be grateful for being an only child.
yeah,
Ah,
I think this comparison is very good. And I think it goes back to my original statement that you count, a census can be for different things.
that's
you
right.
know? And just because it's a census doesn't, and women are not in that, I don't think you can complain that we're excluded from that. I
no,
mean,
we can complain about the other one.
yes, but I'm saying I'm glad I would be glad to be excluded from the draft. I'd be glad to be excluded from some other things that men are perhaps more capable. So I think we have to look at it in that regard.
I agree, but I think you'd be glad to inherit some land too.
Exactly.
Well,
That's where
it
you
does
should
bring
be.
up,
But
it does bring
that's
up,
it. That's where you should be counted, and in some other areas too, but not particularly in that one.
No, I agree. Yes.
it does bring up the question, though, when is it okay to be counted and when is it not okay to be counted? And that's a question of equality.
I agree. And also, though, interestingly enough, in Israel,
Right.
women are in the
Women
army too,
serve.
and they're totally counted.
So there you go.
Absolutely right.
They're counted, but it took them a long time to
I
get
agree.
into the combat
Right.
groups. It
Right.
wasn't so equal as it
No,
sounds.
but it was more equal
No.
than probably any other country in the world.
That,
It
yes,
was
it
the
was.
first
Yes,
army
it
that had
was.
women. I know
I
it was
was
by
supposed-
necessity, but
Right.
I was supposed to go to the army, and I'm
Yeah.
82 today. When I was 17, I got a draft notice.
Yeah,
I
but
was
you would,
supposed- But I got married at 18 and I was excused, but
Ex-
I was supposed to. There was a draft order for me.
yeah, but it wasn't,
That was in
it wasn't,
1958.
it wasn't gonna put you with a gun in a fighting
Right.
corps.
that's
And
fine.
it wasn't
you know.
a new law. By that
Yeah.
time, it was already in the making since the state of Israel was born.
Anyway, I want to wish you all Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Thank
shalom.
you.
This was so
Shalom.
Chag
interesting.
Shalom, thank you.
Chag
Thank you so
Sameach.
much, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chag Sameach.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah,
everybody.
don't forget the rabbis, including Susan, are going to be online tonight, tomorrow
Tomorrow
night.
night.
Tomorrow night with the
It's gonna
10
be
Right.
Commandments.
5 minutes of commandments.
Yeah, that Stanley was trying to figure out how you do that.
You
Uh,
talk really fast.
You talk really fast, but he was like, oh.
well, we'll see. All right. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Risa, they each pick up from the last person's sentence.
It's going to be one sentence. Well,
One long sentence.
well, there's a famous quote from the rabbi who was of German heritage and was the president, Alex Schindler of the URJ.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that when he stood in front of the microphone and they
Yes.
said, you have one sentence. And he said, blah, 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 semicolon.
Right.
And then he went on.
I remember that from
I
a biennial
remember
or a national board
It was a
meeting or something.
biennial. It was a biennial. I was there too. How come you
Have a
didn't
good
say
one.
hello to me?
I missed you. I'm sorry. I said hello to you 2 weeks ago.
That was
I'll
fun.
say hello again.
We're not going to be there tonight though. So
No, I won't be there tonight.
yeah, good.
The
Bye bye.
24th is my next event.
Okay, we'll be there then.
Okay.
Okay.
See you later. Have
See
a
you
good
later,
weekend.
everybody. You
Shabbat
too.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Chag Sameach.
You too.